This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Welcome, everyone. As we learn here in the beautiful Shul in Woodburn, known as the Nickelsburg Shul, B'Reshus Lamad Asra of Young Rice, with appreciation to you for coming, although it was lightning and threatening rain, and very easy instead to stay indoors. We learn with the tefillah that all those that have been touched by the dreaded machla and other related diseases should have a refuah shalema v'seich shachar Yisrael. All of us and our loved ones should always be healthy. We learn that those that are looking for their shidduch should find their shidduch quickly and easily. Those that are awaiting children should be blessed with zarachaya v'kayama, healthy mommy, healthy baby. We should have parnasa berevach v'chavod and lange gesundte zisa shalom bayis. We learn especially the refuah shalema from my Rebbetzin, Miriam Liba Bas Devora. She should have a refuah shalema b'seich shachar Yisrael. We will speak about Inyana D'Yayma, davar be'itay ma'tayv, thing in its proper time, how good it is. The Kotzker Rebbe asks a very interesting question. It says in the beginning of Shulchan Aruch, Roy l'kol yorei shamayim liyos meitzer v'doyeg al churban beis hamikdash. It is fitting for every God-fearing person, that's a special level, a yorei shamayim, to be grieved and to worry about the destruction of the temple. Asks the Kotzker Rebbe, Zeichet Tzadik L'Vrach, Zchus Yogan Aleinu, why only a Yorei Shemayim? If you're not on the level of a Yorei Shemayim, you shouldn't be Meitzer V'Dayik. You know, it says a Yorei Shemayim should wear woolen tzitzis. If you're not a Yorei Shemayim, you can wear cotton tzitzis. So there's an extra level that a Yorei Shemayim wears woolen tzitzis. It says that a Yorei Shemayim should not only be Ma'aveh Sedra, Shnayim Mikra V'Echet Targum, but also should learn Rashi. If you're not a Yorei Shemayim, if you're not on that darga, so then you do just Shnayim Mikra V'Echet Targum. But what do you mean, Roy, L'chol Yorei Shemayim Liyos Meitzer V'Doig Al Churban Beis HaMikdash? Every Yid has to be Meitzer V'Doig Al Churban Beis HaMikdash. That's the Kotzker Rebbe's kash. And the Kotzker Rebbe gives, in his penetrating way, a very, very strong answer. He says, if you're not a Yorei Shemayim, you should be Meitzer V'Doig first that you're not a Yorei Shemayim. Roy l'kol Yorei Shemayim liyos Meitzer V'Doig al churban beis hamikdash. If you're not a Yorei Shemayim, first be Meitzer V'Doig that you're not a Yorei Shemayim. Now, this is not just funny, but you have to know, because it's zeh toli b'zeh. One depends on the other. When are you going to be meitzer v'doig on the Churban Beis HaMikdash? When you have a strong sense of Yorei Shemayim. A person that's Yorei Shemayim is going to feel that the Shechina is not shruya b'seichenu. He's going to feel the loss that Hashem doesn't dwell v'shachanti b'seichem. Somebody that's not a Yorei Shemayim doesn't feel that loss. But somebody that's a dovik in the Eibishter feels that loss. I'll give you an example of zeh toli b'zeh that's similar to this. Humility and Yiras Hashem depend one on another. Ramila used to say that the more Yorei Shemayim that you are, the more God-fearing you are, the bigger an onav you are. That's why Moshe Rabbeinu was ish onav mikol adam. He was the most humble of people. Why? Because lo'iro ponim el ponim k'Moshe. There was no Yorei Shemayim like Moshe, right? That's why Moshe is the same list as Hashem. Because there was nobody that saw Hashem ponim el ponim k'Moshe. Memela, therefore, he realized more than everybody else how small he was. So, Yira and Anova are totally zeh b'zeh. I realized after a long time that that's pshat in Tosfos in the 12th parak of Yevamos. Tosfos says, it says in the pasuk, Ekev anova yiras Hashem. Besides humility is yiras Hashem. And Tosfos says an incredible statement. Look it up in the 12th parak of Mitzvah Chalitza. It's an amazing Tosfos. Tosfos says, Malamed sheshneim shkulin. That teaches us that humility and awareness of Hashem is equal. Now, at face value, that's a Peledic Tosfos. How can you say Anava and Yiras Hashem are equal? Yiras Hashem is everything. Soif davar kol nishma salichim yiraki zekal adam. Ma Hashem alikecha shoyel me'ima kiyim liyira. Reishis chachma Yiras Hashem. Hakol b'dei shemayim chutz me'yiras shemayim. How can you say that Anava and Yira are at the same level? Yira is everything. But the answer, I think what Tosfos means, is Yira and Anova come hand in hand. They're shkul in hand. Because if you have Yira, you're going to be humble. Because if you're aware of Hashem, then you're aware how small you are. And you're aware that nothing exists without Hashem. So how could you be misgah on anything when they know milvadai? One of my Talmidim sent me a message that Ein Oid Milvadai, in the word Milvadai is my wife's name. Because Milvadai is Miriam Liba Bas Devora Weiss. So in Milvadai is my wife's name. And Milvadai is Miriam Liba Bas Devora Weiss. So therefore, there was a Maisa with Reb Chaim Kanievsky. A bacher came into him and said that he doesn't have any feelings for the Beis HaMikdash. It bothers him, but he doesn't feel the loss of the Beis HaMikdash. He can't get upset about it. So he told this bacher this word from the Kotzkim, that it says that Roy L'chol Yarei Shamayim Liyos Meitzer V'Dayik. If you don't feel anything, then that means that you are lacking in Yarei Shamayim. And therefore, don't be upset that you don't feel anything about the Beis HaMikdash. Be upset that you're lacking Yarei Shamayim. And he told him, if you want to work on that, learn Musar. So this is the season where we work on mourning for the Beis HaMikdash and becoming more aware of the loss of the Beis HaMikdash. Says the Chazal, Kol HaMisabel al Yerushalayim, whoever mourns over Yerushalayim, Zoiche v'royim b'simchasa, will merit to see its joy. So it says in Koheles, we all know the pasuk in Koheles, I'll mention pieces of it. Eis l'ledes ve'eis l'mos. There's time for everything. There's time to be born. There's a time to die. Eis livkais ve'eis l'skaik. There's a time to cry. There's a time to laugh. Eis lachavok. There's a time to hug. Ve'eis l'rchok mechabek. There's time to stay away from hugging. So Chazal tell us that each one is cause and effect. Eis l'ledes. It's time to give birth. That's why Eis Lamos. Somebody is born, they're going to die. Eis Lirchaik, Eis Lachabok, the Eis Lirchaik Mechabek. There's a time to hug, and there's a time to distance from hugs. That refers to in Shul. It's a time to hug the Torah. Time to hug the Torah. And there's a time not to hug your children. That's halacha. You don't hug your children in Shul. Right? Because you're only supposed to show love to Hashem in Shul. And therefore it says, Eis livkais ve'eis l'schak, is a time to cry and a time to laugh. That's referring to the Churban Beis HaMikdash. Eis livkais is a time to cry, and people that know how to cry over the Churban, Eis l'schak, then they will laugh, because Kol HaMisabel al Yerushalayim, Zoicha L'Rois B'Simchasa. Now, the fact of the matter is that over 2,000 years, after the Churban, it's hard to miss the Beis Hamikdash. It's not an easy thing. You know, if they would close down Walmart, people would miss Walmart a lot more than the Beis Hamikdash. We just had Walmart. Now there's no Walmart, no Walmart. For other people, it might be their favorite pizza shop. And that you could sink your teeth in. That you could mourn. Beis Hamikdash. And you have to know that we make a statement when we treat the loss of the Beis Hamikdash as an Avelus Chadosha. What's that? It's not an Avelus Yeshana. We treat it like an Avelus Chadosha. We sit on the floor. Until Chatzais, we treat it like a new morning. Now that's, first of all, because we realize that Kol Dor Shelo Nivne Beis Hamikdash B'Yamav Ki'ilu Charav B'Yamav. Any generation that the Beis Hamikdash wasn't built, it was destroyed again. So it's not an Avelus Yeshana. It's not something that happened 2,000 years ago. It happened now. Because if we would be worthy, we would have the Beis Hamikdash. And therefore, the fact that we don't, it's as if it was destroyed again. So we know when we want to have an idea of what to work on. So we all know that the Gemara, it says, Ashrei Odom Mifachei Tamid. Fortune is a person who is always fearful. And with that pasuk, the Gemara introduces the story of Kamsa bar Kamsa. Now, first of all, I want to talk to you about this pasuk Ashrei Odom Mefachei Tamid, because that's a very difficult pasuk. Fortune is a person who's always fearful. Fear, worry, mefached is worry. Worry is not a good thing. Worry is not a good thing. I always say over that the word worry, daga, right, like in the song Daga, 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 Menai, and the word worry, daga, is all the letters of the Aleph base except for the base. All the beginning letters, Daled, Aleph, Gimel, Hey, all the beginning letters except for the base, right? So it has an Aleph, it has a Gimel, it has a Daled, Hey, no base. Because it's only if the base of B'tachin is missing that you have Daga. With the base of B'tachin, you won't have Daga. So it also says that Daga is Shoiver Chatzi Gufay Shaladam. Worry breaks half the constitution of man. So therefore, we're taught that we shouldn't needlessly worry. Now, worry is not a good thing. People end up worrying about things that never will happen. Here's a man, he's very worried. What's he worried about? Well, he made a calculation that his pension is only good until 78. After that, how is he going to live? Truth of the matter is he died at 73. So all that time he was worrying for nothing. Worry is not a good thing. I remember many years ago, my mother, so sein gesund, became pregnant at 46. Nowadays, with people having children, one after another, 46 is not such a chiddush. But many years ago, 46 was old, and the doctors told her that it's very likely the baby won't be healthy, and they scared her. So I remember going, Rav Moshe was still alive. It was at the end of Rav Moshe's life. I remember going to Rav Moshe and asking him for a bracha. He gave a bracha. And then I said to him, my mama daget. My mother's worried. And I'll never forget, he told me not to tell my mother, but he told me, was helps the daga? What does worrying help? That's what Rav Moshe said. So worry is not a good thing. And here it says, Ashrei Odom Mifachei Tamid. Fortunate is a person who always worries. So what's pshat? So listen carefully. Because there's zwei dinim in worry. Zwei dinim in worry. There's what's called constructive worry, and there's what's called destructive worry. Constructive worry is a very good thing. So therefore, if a person is worried, he saw somebody who choked. If you ever saw somebody choke while eating, it scares a person. So because of that, he doesn't talk while he eats. That's constructive worry. If a person all of a sudden is not eating salads because he's afraid he's going to choke, that's destructive worry. Constructive worry is if a person sees a bad car accident and it gets him to make a tfilas haderech with kavana, it gets him to put on his seatbelt, that's constructive worry. Destructive worry is not going in a car. That's destructive worry. When we say Ashrei Odam Mifachei Tomid, it means that a person's worry causes a person to do smart things. That's constructive worry is a very good thing. And therefore, the Gemara tells us that we could trace the straw that broke the camel's back of the Churban Beis Hamikdash to a ma'aseh that happened. Somebody was making a wedding, and he told his shliach, who goes nameless, because he can't blame the shliach, it's a human mistake. He told him to invite his friend Kamsa. And the shliach instead made a mistake and invited the enemy Bar Kamsa. So here is the night of the wedding, and the host comes in and he sees his enemy there. And in true Haman spirit, he says, I can't enjoy my simcha with you here. You're here, it ruins everything. There are people like that. One thing ruins everything. Right? The wife prepared a great Shabbos, but forgot the chrein, the whole Shabbos is ruined. There's some people that way. Says, you're here, I can't enjoy my simcha. Get out. So he said, the whole town is here. Don't embarrass me in front of the whole town. Get out. He said, I'll pay for my portion. It's $100 a plate. I'll pay for my portion. Get out. You know what? Spare me the embarrassment. I'll pay for half the wedding. Here's $40,000. Get out. You know what? It would embarrass me so badly. That's the koyach habush. It would embarrass me. So I'll pay for the whole wedding. I'm ready to write you a check of $80,000. Get out. And he got the guys to eject him from the wedding. Bar Kamsa saw the rabbis were by the dais. They didn't say anything. And he went and he slandered us to the Romans, which led to the Churban Beis Hamikdash, Churban Bayis Sheni. So the Gemara says on that, Ashrei Odam Mifachei Tomid. Fortunate is a person who considers the consequences of their actions. What do you mean, consider the consequences? We have to tell our children, you're in the schoolyard, and there's a boy, Yankila, that nobody wants on his team. Nobody wants Yankila. So one side says, you take Yankila. The other side says, no, we don't want Yankila. You take Yankila. This is all in front of Yankila. So, you know what? We don't want him. How do you think Yankila feels? So the Chazal say, Kol amal b'mnei chaveiroi b'rabim ein lo chelik le'olam haba. So Ashrei Odam Mifachei Tamid. Fortunate is a person that's fearful of the consequences. We have to teach our children this. When we say that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed because of Kamsa Bar Kamsa, Chazal is teaching us what we're supposed to do with the 9 days. What we're supposed to do with Tisha B'Av. We're supposed to tell our children we still don't have a Beis Hamikdash. That means that the sin of Kamsa Bar Kamsa is still very much with us. The great Rebbes made it a point to say, How do we battle sinas chinam? We battle sinas chinam with avas chinam. Now, what did the great Rebbes mean by that? What did they mean, avas chinam? The Rosh, in Orches Chaim La Rosh, says, Al teref yodcha milevakesh reim vahuvim. Do not slack off. Do not relax. Right? Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, Heref mimeni, let me go, vashmidei. So the Rosh says, Al teref yodcha, do not let go, milevakesh reim vahuvim, from seeking many friends and people that you love. The Rosh, a thousand years ago, the Rosh says, make an effort to make many friends. That's the answer to sinas chinam. Make an effort to make many friends. You know, a lot of people say, I have one friend, das ist genug. You know, I don't need it, I don't want it, leave me alone. The Rosh himself was a very busy person. But the posture of a Yid, he goes on to say, and let it not be insignificant in your eyes, even one enemy. The Rosh says you should strive to be able to say, I don't have an enemy in the world. He says, Al tamit, let it not be small in your eyes to have one enemy. A person shouldn't even have one enemy. He said, one enemy is too much. One enemy could destroy a shidduch. One enemy could cost your job. One enemy could hurt your marriage. Even one enemy. Now, there's another Orches Chaim. This is Orches Chaim L'Rosh. There was another Rishon who wrote another sefer. You know, Orches Chaim, a way of life, is a popular thing. So there's another Rishon that wrote Orches Chaim. He was called Rav Luniel. There's another sefer. That's a much rarer sefer. But there's another sefer called Orches Chaim L'Harav Luniel, who was also a Rishon. And he wrote the same idea, but he made it very attractive. And he gives a preface. Harotze laharich yomim. If you want to live long, now we're all interested. You want to live long? Harotze laharich yomim, have a marba ba'achim v'reim. Have many brothers and friends. That's what he says. This is to seduce us, to make friends. He says, Harotze laharich yomim, if you want to live long, have a marba ba'achim v'reim. Right? This is the flip side of sinas chinam that destroys everything. So first of all, you'll say to me, Rabbi Weiss, how could I be marba ba'achim? How could I have many brothers? That's up to my parents. It's not up to me. How can I be marba ba'achim? So let me tell you something that my Rebbetzin taught me. Every Mother's Day, my Rebbetzin goes to the drugstore and buys a stack of Mother's Day cards. And she sends a Mother's Day card to a whole slew of altar women. And she writes in them, you know, you're like a mother to me. Now, my wife had a very chush of a mother, Aleh Shalom, my shviger, who was the secretary to Rav Henkin in Ezra's Torah. Was a very chush of a woman. She used to send messages back and forth between Rav Henkin and Rav Moshe and Rav Moshe and Rav Henkin. But my wife said my mother wouldn't mind. These are old women, many of them are widows. And I write to them, you're like a mother to me, I make their day. So my wife made herself many mothers. You could make yourself many bridelach. You could say to someone, you know, you're like a brother to me. You're like a brother to me. One of my best friends is an only child. And I always tell him, you're like a brother to me. Feels good, he doesn't have any brothers. You're like a brother to me. So the Rosh, this is taking a page out of the Rosh. The Rosh says, have many brothers and friends. So you'll say, but Rabbi Weiss, you want to live long. You want to live long. There's plenty of eitzes. Honor your parents. And it is covered, keep it of even achamoisai. So that's an eitzah. You want to live long? There's other eitzes. Do shalach hakan. You want to live long? Learn Torah. But what's this? You want to live long? Have friends? What's that all about? So listen carefully. I'll tell you what it's all about. You see, Hashem judges the world b'skira achas, with one view. Hatzor tomim pa'alai. His ways are perfect. So let's say this person, we'll call him Chatzkel, he was a bad boy. Speaks a lot of Lashon Hara. Now we know Hamovas V'chayim B'yad HaLashon. We talked about that last week. Lashon Hara, it could kill you. This person does a lot of bad things. But every Friday he goes to a nursing home and visits an old man. The whole week this old man lives for his visit. He made this old man his friend. When Hashem judges him, Hashem says, that man in the nursing home doesn't deserve to lose him. So therefore Hashem won't take him away from this world. Now I have to tell you, when I say this, people ask a kasha. I know a lot of people that are needed that died. The kasha that people ask. So I'll tell you, I always say over this story because it's one of the few times that I felt that the Rabbeinu Shalom gave me an answer, put it in my mouth. I was giving a shir in Rabbi Oldbaum's Shul. At that year, Yom Kippur fell out on Monday. So they asked me to give Motzi Shabbos, which was Erev Yom Kippur, a shir Hisiris. So I named the shir the best defense for the last day of the year. And the idea of the shir was to make ourselves needed. That was the idea of our shir. Make yourself needed. Because the more people that need you, the more protected you are. And I said, of course, the most important thing is to make yourself needed by your spouse. Why? Because you see, a husband and wife are a set. They're a set. Arba'im Yom Kodim Yetziras Havlad, a bas goes out and says, Bas Ploinus LePloini, the daughter of so-and-so to so. Why 40 days before the creation? Because the Vlad is created to match with that girl. And ever see you buy a computer, it says Intel inside? So I have a little chip that says Rebitz and Weiss inside. It's a little chip. I'm made for Rebitz and Weiss. Rebitz and Weiss is made for me. Hashem doesn't want to break that set. I don't want to break that set. So even if I'm not so good, but I do what I'm supposed to for my wife needs me. It's a big protection. Big protection. A second big protection is when we do for our children. That's also a very big protection. You know, it says, Istakel boraiso bara alma. Hashem looked in the Torah and created the world. That means that everything in the world is created because of a state in Torah. For example, the Gemara in Sanhedrin says, why do people look different? Why ain't parts of Fayam Doimai Zulazu? Why does everybody look different? So the Gemara says, because the Rabbeinu Shalom looked in the Torah and saw that it says, Lo Sigzal. But if I would look like you, then I could go into your wife and say, could I have the Rolex? And she'll give it to me because she'll think it's you. So therefore, in order that it shouldn't be Lo Sigzal, everybody looks different. That's a Gemara in Sanhedrin. So says the Gemara, so why did the Rabbeinu Shalom make genetics? There's such a thing as genetics. Yeah, you look at a child and you see from the way the child walks in from the back, you say, oh, that's a Schwartz. That's the way Schwartzes walk. Why did Rabbeinu Shalom make genetics? Istakel baraisa. Hashem looked in the Torah and saw it says in the Torah, Chanoich lenar al pi darkai. You have to educate the child. How am I supposed to know how to educate the child? Genetics. Child is like me. So I know how to educate my child. Therefore, if I do my job in educating my children, Hashem doesn't want to take me away. Because there's nobody else that can replace that. Nobody can replace. That's why you shouldn't blame everything on the Rebbein. Chinuch is a partnership. The Rebbe doesn't know your child like you. It has to be communication. So therefore, if a person is a good husband, a good wife, a good parent, that's a big protection. They need it. So this is what I said in Rabbi Olbaum's Shul. So after the shir, a young woman came over to me, said, Rabbi Weiss, I read all your articles. I listened to all your tapes. There were no CDs then. This was before. This was in the era of cassettes. There was no CDs. It was a long time ago. I listened to all your tapes. But I have to say, what you said to me in this share really hurts me terribly. So you see, my husband died 3 months ago, Le'aleinu, and left me a young widow with a whole shtib, with a whole house of kinder, a whole house of children. I'd like to believe that I need my husband. I'd like to believe that my children needed their father. He used to learn with them. I have nobody to learn with my children Gemara now. So what happened to your protection? Boom! It's like getting hit by lightning. Rahman al-Litzlan. Boom! So I felt I had siyata d'shmaya at that moment. And I told her as follows. The protection to be needed that we're talking about over here, to get friends that need you, that protection helps if it's not a person's case. Right? In the Sanatoik, if we say, mi bekitzai u mi loy bekitzai, who in their time and who not in their time. If it's their time, then these protections don't help. The proof is, Shmuel HaNavi died at 52. You don't think the world needed Shmuel HaNavi? Shlomo HaMelech died at 52. You don't think the world needed Shlomo HaMelech? Rebbe Boone in the Yerushalmi. Rebbe Boone is mentioned in the Yerushalmi like Rava in the Bavli. Rebbe Boone died at 26. You don't think the world needed more of Rebbe Boone? But if it's a person's case, that's it. With perhaps one exception. Tzedakah could help even beyond the case. We learned that out. Gemara Bava Basra, Binyamin HaTzadik took care of a woman and her 7 children and was given extra years. That's tzedakah tatzim lemavos. But otherwise, these things don't help for the case. It helps the people that died before that case. Because of sin. Many people died because they got involved in machloikis, because of lashon hara, because they embarrassed people. Many people died. Lo bekitzai. Ashrei adam mefachei tamid. Person has to worry that maybe he's lo bekitzai. We're coming to Elul any day. That helps. The answer to sinas chinam is avas chinam. We know. This is a very important point. If you look at the slichas, we don't just have kinnis about the churban. It's interesting. One of the most moving slichas, because people can understand it. By the way, I will be saying shir on slichas, on kinnis, slichas, on kinnis, this Tisha B'Av in Lakeview Estates. Lakeview Estates is a new development between the Four Corners and Wordburn when you're coming from the Four Corners on the left side. Chakras is 9 o'clock, and I'll be saying on all the slichas is a little point to give a little meaning to the slichas. I still didn't finish preparing, so I need siyata d'shmaya to do it, but Mirz Hashem, I'm doing it. The Olam is invited to come. I got permission to invite people to come. I'm also speaking in TriStar Bungalows, Be'ez Hashem, after Mincha. Mincha is 2 o'clock, and then again in Woodridge, between Mincha and Ma'ariv. But anyway, We say a kapitel Arzei Halavonon, which is very moving. Everybody understands it's the Asara Harugei Malchus. We also say it in Yom Kippur, Eile Eskera Ve'ehemoya. Right? We say about the Asara Harugei Malchus. What most people do not know, take somebody with the encyclopedic knowledge of Rav Chaim Kanievsky to point out, is that the 10 tzaddikim did not die all at the same time. It's clear. Rabbi Shmuel Kohen Gadol and Rabbi Shimon Gamliel lived at the time of the Churban. The rest of the Asara Hamurgei Malchus, most of them was 60 years later at the time of the Bar Kochba rebellion. Kiva, it's at the time of the Bar Kochba rebellion. Wasn't at the same time. In the hindsight of history, we know that these 10 tzaddikim died because of the sin of Mechiras Yosef. Just like the Ben Ish Chai says that Rabbi Yochanan, who said, "Den garmo das hira beer," this is the bone of my 10th son. He lost his 10 sons because of the sin of Mechiras Yosef. That's what the Ben Ish Chai says. But what's important to realize is that we don't only mourn the Beis Hamikdash. This is a time where we mourn Jewish calamities in general. In general. Why? Because we realize that once we don't have a Beis Hamikdash, terrible things happen to Klal Yisrael. When we had a Beis Hamikdash, and the Shechina was Shriya B'Seicheinu, and we were able to be Mechaper with Karbanos, that was a very big protection. We don't have that protection now. And therefore, we mourn all calamities. That's why there are many kinnis. There's a kinnis about the Chmielnicki massacres in Poland. We say a kinnis from the Baba Rebbe and from Rav Schwab about the Holocaust. It's interesting that Rav Chaim Kanievsky said that if a person can't learn the stories of the Churban or the Gemaras, so you could read biographies of tzaddikim. And this is based on something that the Chazon Ish said, that on Tisha B'Av you could read Seder HaDoros. They say over there, Yoshev Zechet Tzadik L'Vracha Schus Yagan Aleinu read something the doctor told him he couldn't learn. So he read a book on the Holocaust, and he said that this is worthy for the Shaya, for Tisha B'Av. It's interesting that Rav Moshe, I remember when a Choshev delegation came to Rav Moshe about 35 years ago to discuss with him if he would approve the Yom HaShaya. And he refused. Rav Shiva was very, very sensitive to Holocaust survivors, but he refused because Rav Shiva's shita was that, you see, time, we don't believe in a timeline. Time is not a straight line. Time is a spiral. We use the same time again every year. That's why Mishenichnas of Mimatin Besimcha. Because the time, in the fabric of time, the time of Ov is a time of tragedies. That's why we make a bracha, She'asa Nisim on Chanukah, She'asa Nisim Lavoiseinu Bayomim Ha'im, in those days, Bazman Hazeh, with this time. That's why we have in the Gemara in Shabbos, when it says, My Chanukah, it says, L'shona haba, the next year, Kovim, they made the 8 days L'halavoida. Why the next year? Why didn't they do it right away? They waited till the next year to feel the fabric of time and see what the segula was in the time. And they were able to say the school in the time is halal v'hoida. Is a koyach hatfila. Is a koyach of hoida. Ramosha says nobody, at the close of the Gemara, nobody is capable to do that anymore. We can't make any days. I wanted to suggest that even Lag Ba'omer, we don't call anything but Lag Ba'omer. We don't make a day in the calendar. Lag Baimer, it happens to be Lag Baimer. Because if you would have asked me, we shouldn't call it Lag Baimer, because if you say it by accident and you didn't count Sfira yet, you can't count Sfira. So we shouldn't call it Lag Baimer, we call it Lag Baimer, we don't want to make a special day. So Rishiva didn't make a Yom HaShai. He said Tisha B'Av is the Yom HaShai. That's the day that we talk about all calamities that befalls Klal Yisrael. And as the Rambam says, La'oirer alevavos, to awaken the hearts, U'lesaken lochem darchei tshuva. People should fix paths of tshuva. So therefore, in the small amount of I don't believe that time is already fleeing, small amount of time that I have left, as a child of a Holocaust survivor, my father, Olav Hashalom, Rav Aaron Tzvi ben Rameir, was an inmate of Auschwitz. He had the infamous notoriety of having crossed Mengele Yamach Shemai 3 times. The German, in their Yekische record keeping, had marked down that my father went through 3 selections. Passed Mengele with his white glove 3 times. We only knew this because when my father passed away, we found in his drawer an impressive document from Nuremberg that they were inviting him to be a star witness if they caught Mengele. Because not many people passed Mengele 3 times and lived to tell about it. My father did not speak about it much. But one time in the Svardish Shul, more than 40 years ago, about 40 years ago, 39 years ago, I was asked to speak as a child of a survivor. And for my father, it was a very big thing. There was, at that time, there was over 1,000 people that came to that Holocaust memorial. I remember that televisions came from CBS, and it was a big thing. And I told my father, if you want me to speak, you have to tell me something. So that's when my father started talking to me about the Holocaust. One of the things he told me is that, you know that when I was in Auschwitz, I didn't believe about the gas chamber. He said, I got to Auschwitz, and there was a funny smell. And I asked my chaverim, what's the smell? And he said, Hershey, that's us. They're burning us. So he said, I didn't believe it. He says, look, you know about it, but if you wouldn't know about the Holocaust, and they would tell you they're burning people in Chicago, you wouldn't believe it. I don't believe it. The Germans should burn people? I didn't believe it. He said it was only the next morning he came in the Salisha transport, the second Salisha transport. The next morning, the Sanda commando told me, Hershey, your father and mother, we pulled them out of the gas chamber. So my father knew that he had yahrzeit for both his parents, 4 brothers and 1 sister, 4 brothers and 1 sister on the first day of Shavuos. Precise yahrzeit. My father used to scream. I don't remember it. It was in the beginning of my parents' marriage. I was a little child, but my mother told me that Daddy used to scream. She said she didn't know what it was about till one night he was screaming and he mentioned a name. So she asked him. And he said that he went into Auschwitz with his chavrusa from Cheder. And they were in the same barrack. In his barrack there were 90 people. They used to be sent, 4 people used to be sent every day to the central kitchen to bring back a pot of soup. My father said you saw the sadism of the Nazis from that soup. They threw in the most disgusting things bedafka. There were roaches. There were spiders. they threw in the most disgusting things in the soup. And he said, you had to drink it. Because if you didn't drink it the next day, you fell by the mine and you were shot. I'll tell you a story before we get back to this story. I'll tell you a story. In the early 1970s, they showed on television a 3-part mini-series called The Holocaust. And my father, Alav Shalom, called me. I was then learning by Ramesh in Yeshiva Staten Island. He called me that he wants me to come home to watch it. So I said, Daddy, I have to tell Rav Mintz to get permission to go home. What am I going to tell him? I should tell him I have to go home to watch television? So he said, look, either you'll tell him or I'll tell him. So I thought about it. And I said, I'll tell him. I'll tell him. So I go over to Rav Mintz. And I said, Rebbe, I have to go home 3 nights. I'll come back in the morning with Rabbi Goldstein, Alav Shalom. I won't miss first and second Seder, but I have to go home 3 nights. So he looked at me and he said, root canal? Dentist? So I said, no, television. So he says, oh, this is going to be a good one. So I said, they're showing the Holocaust on television. And my father said he wants his family to watch it. Kluge Yid. He looks at me. And he said, then you better go home. So my father, they showed the barracks in Auschwitz. And to us, it looked pretty horrible. Triple deckers without any mattresses on it. It looked pretty horrible. So much so that afterwards on the news, there was somebody that was saying, it could never have been so bad. My father got so angry that he almost threw the clock radio at the television. He says, can't be so bad. They made it look like the Ritz-Carlton. They have no idea what it was. He said, I slept on the 3rd level, and there were rats crawling out and picking at our toes. And we went to sleep anyway. We paid no attention, because if we didn't go to sleep, we died the next day. We were shot the next day. So there were rats picking at our toes. We have no hasaga whatsoever. So my father told me that it came his turn to go and bring the soup from the central kitchen with 3 other people. It took 4 people to... The capo told him that their allies are bombing, and it's very likely that they're going to bomb while you're coming back with the soup. He said, whatever you do, don't leave the soup. Because if you get back without the soup, you're dead. So just come with that trolley. They started bombing. They started shelling everything except for the gas chamber, like Rav Weissmandel writes in Min HaMeitzer. Everything except the gas chamber. And a bomb, there were tracks that came into Auschwitz. If you see the picture, Arbet Machfrei, and there's tracks that come in. A bomb hit the track, and my father's chavrusa had one leg on one side of the track and one leg on the other side of the track. And the bomb hit the track, and the track flew up and split him all the way through the head. And he fell in 2 pieces. That's what they saw. That's what they lived through in the Holocaust. Eila Eskerov, Ehemoya. My father told me, I'll be finished moments. I want everybody to come back next week, so I got to finish in time. My father, Alav Shalom, told me, and by the way, this is also the spirit of Tisha B'Av. Like the Rishiva said, Yom HaShoyah is Tisha B'Av. We realize that all this sorrows happened because we don't have a Beis HaMikdash. You know what a protection it was to have the Kohanim b'Avodah, the Leviim b'Duchanan. You know what a protection it was? You know what a protection it was to have the Orain, even in the Bayis Sheni, a protection that the Shechina was Shruya b'Seichenu. My father told me that during the death march, see what happened at the end when they dismantled Auschwitz, the commandantin of Auschwitz did not want to go to fight on the front. So they kept a few thousand charges and didn't kill the Jews so that they should be busy. It was called the Death March. There were several death marches. My father was on the big death march from Auschwitz. So my father, Olav Hashem, told me, what did they do with us in the night? We were a few thousand Yidden. They were maybe 100 Germans. What could they do with us? They have to sleep too. So there was a tunnel called the Reichenbach Tunnel. Reichenbach Tunnel. And that tunnel was carved halfway through the mountain. So he said they stooped us into the tunnel, of course no bathrooms, no lights. They stooped us in the tunnel and they sealed the doors. So we're a few thousand Yidden in a tunnel in the middle of the night. In the middle of the night, the air ran out. So the hundreds of people that were in the back died of asphyxiation. The hundreds of people that were in the front, where everybody that was strangling pushed forward, the hundreds of people at the front became liquid. They were liquefied. My father was in the middle, and he survived. And I'll tell you something. My father had a brother. My father had two brothers. My uncle Moshe, who was mechutin to the Shefa Chaim, the father of Rav Asher Weiss in Eretz Yisrael, Rav Beryl Weiss, Rav Binyamin Weiss in Montreal, Rav Dudi Weiss in London. And he had another brother, Hilu Eugene Weiss, in Schenectady. And this brother, of course, we can't judge anybody. This brother saw what happened to his parents and his whole family, his uncle, Shalana Kashoichet. And after the war, he lost his Yiddishkeit. He was in Latham, in Schenectady. We used to go visit him occasionally. Before my father passed away, my father said, visit your uncle. Try to do things for your uncle. Because everything that we are, your uncle gets credit. Listen to this, what a person could do with one act in his life. My uncle's neshama should have an aliyah. He said, when we were in the tunnel, in order to get people in the tunnel, they were shooting, and they were killer dogs. And I was so frightened, I wanted to go all the way in the back of the tunnel. And he said, your uncle said, Hershey, I smell death in the back of the tunnel. I smell death. So they stayed in the middle, away from the dogs, in the middle, and that's why they survived. So you don't know. A person does one act, and Kanayin Hara, our family, has many children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren for my father. He said, so be nice to you. My father told me this before he passed away. Rabbi said this is a pitiful preface to Tisha B'Av. I didn't get a chance really to say much. But one thing we should take away from this shir is, first of all, constructive worry, never destructive worry. Constructive worry. Consider the consequences. Ashrei Adam Mefachei Tamid. Never embarrass someone. Never embarrass someone. Think about counsel and by counsel. You see something, try to rectify it. Because the Rabbanim were there, they didn't do anything, and they were held accountable. Remember the Orchos Chaim l'Rav Luniel, l'Roitza l'Harach Yomim Evei Marba ba'achim v'reim. Remember the Rosh. Shouldn't be insignificant in your eyes, even one enemy. Try not to have an enemy in the world. That's the Jewish posture. Remember that it has to be part of us to feel the churban. If we don't feel the churban, then we should be made to v'doig that we don't have the Yiras Shamayim, that we don't miss the Shechina Shruya B'Seicheinu. May come the time soon that we should see the B'Yaskel Tzedek Imhera V'Yameinu.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.